I married into the Sterling family, taking the Han. That night, the cream of Northwood City society had gathered at the Sterling estate to celebrate my mother-in-law, Carol Sterling's 50th birthday. As the man who'd married in, I played the part of a well-dressed butler, weaving through the glittering crowd with a practiced smile, handling the details. "Ethan, you're a lucky man," a slick private equity guy slurred, his glass of scotch sloshing. The contempt in his eyes was undisguised. "Marrying the Sterling heiress. Even if Miss Sterling is unwell, the family fortune will be all yours one day." I just smiled and nodded, offering no argument. "Is my arrogant brother-in-law, Bryce," sneered from nearby. "Please, he's just a glorified caretaker my parents hired to babysit my sister and run the company for free." A wave of muffled snickers rippled through the nearby guests. I'd heard it all before for 5 long years. From an Ivy League honors graduate to the kept man of Northwood City's most powerful family. Married to a woman whose mind had been shattered in a car crash 5 years ago, leaving her with the intellect of a 7-year-old. In everyone's eyes, Ethan Hayes, was the ultimate gold digger, a man who'd sold his soul for a life of luxury. I didn't care. After ensuring the champagne tower was stable, I turned and headed for the 2nd floor of the mansion. There, my wife, Claire Sterling, was sitting on a plush rug in a beautiful party dress, completely absorbed in building a complicated Lego castle. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with features like a Renaissance painting and skin like porcelain. Even now, with a vacant look in her eyes and a sweet, simple smile on her lips, she looked like a fragile doll you couldn't help but want to protect. "Claire, it's time to go downstairs for the cake," I said, crouching beside her. My voice was gentle, a tone I reserved only for her. She looked up, and her face lit up when she saw me. "Ethan, look, I made a castle. Isn't it pretty?" "It's beautiful," I said, smoothing a stray strand of her silky hair. "The most beautiful castle in the whole world." She giggled, taking my hand and leaning against me with the total trust of a child. For 5 years, I had fed her, tucked her in, and read her stories. I was the center of her universe, the sole anchor for her emotions, the only light in her fog. They all thought I did it for the Sterling fortune. They didn't know that if it weren't for that suspicious car, crashed 5 years ago, the brilliant and fiery Claire Sterling, Northwood's most promising young CEO, was supposed to have been my fiancée. We had been in love, about to announce our engagement. But the crash that killed her father also stole her mind. The Sterling family was thrown into chaos. Vultures circled from within the family, and sharks from rival companies smelled blood in the water. As the empire teetered on the brink, I ignored the mockery and confusion of the entire world and chose to marry her, to protect her and the legacy her father had built. I helped her to her feet, and we walked hand in hand toward the grand staircase. But just as we reached the landing, the hand that had been clinging to mine suddenly let go. I turned, puzzled. She had stopped. The childlike innocence on her face was melting away like a mirage, replaced by an expression of ice-cold lucidity. Her eyes, once as clear and simple as a child's, were now 2 bottomless pools of Arctic water, glittering with a sharp, unfamiliar light. Her red lips parted. "Ethan," she said, her voice cool and tinged with the authority of someone long accustomed to being in charge. "5 years. You must be tired of the performance." A jolt went through me, but I kept my face a perfect mask of calm. She stepped toward me, her gaze sweeping over me as if inspecting a piece of property. "You've done well these past 5 years. Staging this little play of the devoted husband, fending off all the creeps and opportunists for me. You even managed the company competently." A small, mocking smile touched her lips. "But I'm back now. So isn't it time you returned my empire to its rightful owner?" Below us, the buzz of the party felt like it was coming from another planet. The crystal chandelier overhead cast a cold light, illuminating the detached suspicion in her eyes. I looked at her face, so familiar and yet so terrifyingly new, and I finally understood. She had been awake for a long time. Or maybe she had never truly been gone at all. For 5 years, she had been acting, playing the innocent, broken girl, making me her willing shield, her loyal general defending the castle walls. And I was the most effective piece on her chessboard. Now, the game was won, the timing perfect, and the queen herself was finally stepping onto the board to claim her victory. The air between us crackled with a silent, tense confrontation. I looked at her, and slowly I smiled. A smile that I knew was colder than the ice in her eyes. "Honey," I said, my voice deceptively soft, just as it always was. "Did you really think your 5 years of playing dumb were all for your own benefit? Or," I added, "did you really think I didn't know you were faking it?" Claire's pupils contracted violently. The first crack appeared in her composure. My reaction was clearly not in her script. What did you say?" Her voice held the faintest tremor. I took a step forward, closing the distance between us. My height made her instinctively retreat, but only half a step. I leaned in, my lips close to her ear, and spoke in a low voice only she could hear. "You like a glass of hot milk before bed, but it has to be exactly 185 degrees. You said it's the perfect temperature, not too hot to burn your tongue, but warm enough that it doesn't get cold too fast. You hate cilantro and celery. Whenever my mother puts them in her soup, you meticulously pick out every last piece and bury it under your rice. You kick off the covers when you sleep, but if I'm lying next to you with my arm over you, you sleep like a stone. And you have a mild allergy to aspirin. Every time a doctor prescribed it for your headaches, you'd throw the pills away and tell me you took them." With every detail I listed, the color drained further from her face. These were habits, patterns, and preferences that a person with a mind of 7-year-old could never maintain with such consistency. She stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You? How long have you known?" "Since your 2nd year of recovery," I said, straightening up and putting some distance between us. The smile on my face widened. "Claire, you're a phenomenal actress. But unfortunately for you, your audience was a director with a keener eye. The car crash 5 years ago had caused a severe concussion, and for a short time, she was genuinely confused. But she recovered far faster than any doctor predicted. About a year after the accident, I started to get suspicious. I noticed she would secretly browse financial news late at night when she thought I was asleep. I found the latest corporate financial statements hidden between the pages of the brightly colored picture books on her shelf. I realized that her afternoons spent boredly building with Legos were actually sophisticated simulations of market strategies and business acquisitions. She was carefully crafting her disguise, observing everyone around her. And while she was observing the world, I was silently, carefully observing her. We were like two master spies sharing a bed, each playing a role in an elaborate, unspoken charade. The only difference was she thought she was the only director. Then why? Claire's voice was strained. "Why didn't you expose me? Why did you let me use you?" "Use me?" I repeated the words, savoring them. "Claire, we're husband and wife. It's not using each other. It's called division of labor." I turned my back to her, looking down at the glittering, hollow charade of the party below. 5 years ago, Sterling Industries was in chaos. Your father was dead, you were gone, and your darling brother, Bryce, is a trust fund kid who couldn't manage a lemonade stand. Your mother, Carol, knows nothing beyond mahjong and party planning. If I had exposed you back then, thrown you back onto the stage, do you honestly think those wolves would have given you a moment to breathe? They would have torn you to shreds. So, you needed a decoy, a lightning rod, a fool who everyone thought was just in it for the money, someone to draw all the fire so you could pull the strings safely from behind the curtain. I turned back, my eyes locking with hers. And I, my dear, willingly became your human shield for 5 years. Claire was utterly silent. She was brilliant. She understood every implication of what I was saying. If I had exposed her then, the Sterling Empire would have been carved up and sold for parts. By choosing to play along, I had given her the only thing that could have saved her and her legacy: time. The sharp hostility in her eyes slowly gave way to a complex storm of emotions. Shock, confusion, and a flicker of something else. Something she herself didn't seem to recognize. "So, everything you did it for me?" she asked, testing the words. I laughed. "Of course not," I replied, the words as sharp and clean as a guillotine, severing the hope that had just begun to bloom in her eyes. "Everything I did for myself first." I stepped toward her, gripping my chin and forcing her to meet my gaze. The tenderness was gone, replaced by cold calculation and an ambition I no longer bothered to hide. "Claire, I won't deny that I love you, but I also love money, power, and the feeling of being in control. In the last 5 years, I saved Sterling Industries. I took it from the brink of bankruptcy and tripled its market value. Your father built the foundation, but I built the skyscraper on top of it. Do you really think I would hand it over so easily? She was pinned by my stare, unable to move. What do you want? She asked through gritted teeth. It's simple. I released her, my fingers gently adjusting the collar of her dress in a gesture of chilling intimacy. From this day forward, I run Sterling Industries. And you, Claire Sterling, have two choices. One, you can go back to being the beautiful, untouchable heiress. I'll ensure you live a life of absolute luxury, a revered mascot for the company. Or, I paused, leaning in close again, my voice a seductive whisper, you can try to take the company back from me, if you're good enough. Without another glance at her, I turned, put on my mild, harmless smile, and descended the stairs. Ladies and gentlemen, my apologies for the delay. Claire isn't feeling her best, but we can begin with the cake now. Behind me, Claire stood frozen on the landing, her expression a whirlwind of fury and disbelief. I knew I had just personally lit the fuse. A war for power, for money, and for love had officially begun, and I had been waiting for a very long time. The next day, the atmosphere in the Sterling Industries emergency board meeting was thick enough to cut with a knife. I sat in the chairman's seat, the one that had belonged to Claire's father. Behind me, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Northwood City's financial district. Across the polished mahogany table sat Claire, dressed in a sharp, tailored business suit. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her makeup flawless. The ethereal goddess from last night had transformed into a formidable queen. I propose a motion to remove Ethan Hayes from his position as acting CEO of Sterling Industries. Claire's voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the room. Behind her sat several of the company's old guard, men who had been loyal to her father. Clearly, she had spent the night rallying her troops. One of them, a director named Davis, immediately seconded. I agree with Miss Sterling. While Mr. Hayes has served the company well these past 5 years, he is, after all, an outsider. Now that Ms. Sterling has recovered, it is only right that she resume leadership. I agree. Seconded. A chorus of agreement rose from her side of the table. The people on my side, mostly executives I had promoted myself, exchanged uneasy glances. My dear mother-in-law, Carol, and her useless son, Bryce, sat flanking Claire. Carol stared at me, her face a mask of disappointment and rage. Ethan, we welcomed you into this family. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? By trying to steal my daughter's company. Bryce slammed his hand on the table. Don't push your luck, Hayes. Pack your things and get out. You're not welcome here. I watched the melodrama unfold with a cool detachment, my fingers tapping a steady, rhythmic beat on the table. Only when their voices died down did I speak. Are we finished? My gaze swept over every person in the room before landing on Claire. Ms. Sterling, you've only just come back, and you're already trying to stage a coup. Isn't that a bit hasty? This isn't a coup. I'm taking back what's mine, she shot back, her chin high. What's yours? I chuckled, pulling a manila folder from my briefcase and sliding it into the center of the table. Mr. Davis, Mr. Miller, and the rest of you gentlemen, my gaze turned razor sharp. This folder contains copies of your private emails and wire transfers with our biggest competitor, Thorne Consolidated, over the past 3 years. You've been selling our company's trade secrets under the guise of loyalty. Would you like me to read the exact figures out loud? The faces of the old guard directors turned a ghastly shade of white. Davis sputtered, That's slander. You have no proof. No proof. I pressed a button on the conference room remote. The large screen on the wall flickered to life, displaying a series of crystal-clear surveillance photos. The photos showed Davis and the others meeting with executives from Thorne Consolidated in private clubs, exchanging documents, and shaking hands. The evidence was irrefutable. Now, I said, leaning back in my chair, does anyone still believe I'm slandering them? The old men looked like they were about to have a collective heart attack. Claire's face was just as grim. She never imagined that her most trusted allies were rotten to the core. And she certainly never imagined that I knew every detail of their betrayal. As for my dear mother-in-law and my wonderful brother-in-law, my gaze shifted to Carol and Bryce. Carol, Would you like me to calculate your total losses at the tables in Vegas these last few years? Every dollar of that debt was paid off by me, using my own money, not the company's. I have all the receipts. Carol's face cycled through shades of red and white. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. And Bryce, I looked at him with undisguised contempt. You crashed a company car while street racing and nearly killed someone. I made that go away. You knocked up some B-list actress. I paid her off to keep her quiet. You funneled millions from the company into a series of disastrous startup investments. I cooked the books to cover your tracks. So tell me, I said, my eyes sweeping over them all, what right do any of you have to stand here and point a finger at me? The boardroom was utterly silent. Bryce's face was beet red. You're lying. You cooked the books. That's embezzlement. I'll call the cops. Go ahead, I said, holding my hands out in a gesture of surrender. Call them. Let's have the police conduct a full audit and see exactly where all that money went. We'll see who goes to prison first. Bryce's mouth snapped shut. Finally, my gaze returned to Claire, a flicker of amusement in my eyes. So, Ms. Sterling, do you still want to fire me? Claire's fists were clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. She thought she had played a trump card, that she could sweep in and checkmate me in a single move. She never dreamed that I'd seen her entire hand and had prepared a counter for every card she could possibly play. She had lost this battle before it even began. She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw not just fury, but a deep sense of frustration and defeat. What is it you really want? She asked, each word seeming to take a monumental effort. I told you yesterday, I said, rising from my chair and walking to her side. I looked down at her, a king addressing a challenger. I run this company. If you have a problem with that, you are welcome to challenge me. Use your talent, use your skill, and win it back from me, fair and square. But until that day comes, I picked up the nameplate for acting CEO from the table and placed it gently in front of her. My voice was low and clear. You, like everyone else in this room, will answer to me. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was stunned into silence by my audacity. I knew, in that moment, that Sterling Industries had well and truly fallen into my control, and the war between Claire and me had only just begun. But she didn't know that my motives went deeper than just power and ambition. Hidden beneath this corporate chess game was a much darker secret, a secret about the car crash 5 years ago, and the truth about her father's death. And this entire, elaborate game was just a trap to lure the real predator out of the shadows. After the board meeting, Claire and I entered a strange and volatile Cold War. We still lived under the same roof, slept in the same bed, but the air between us was thick with the scent of gunpowder. Done with her charade, she fully embraced her identity as the sharp, relentless businesswoman she truly was. She came to the office with me every day, taking on the title of special assistant to the CEO, and sat in on every major decision. She watched me like a hawk, a predator studying its prey, looking for any weakness in my strategy, any mistake she could exploit. She worked to win back the loyalty of the old guard I had exposed, try to poach the rising stars I had promoted, and challenge my proposals at every turn, attempting to undermine my authority from within. The conflicts were constant. When the company was bidding on a major development plot in the East Bridge district, I pushed for an aggressive, high-risk offer. In the project meeting, in front of all the top executives, Claire shot down my plan. The bid is too high, more than 30% above market value. If the city zoning plans change, the company could be bankrupted. I want to prove it, she said, her tone absolute. Risk is proportional to reward, I replied calmly. I have solid intelligence that a new subway line is being approved for Eastbridge within 6 months. The land value will double overnight. Solid intelligence? A back alley rumor. Claire scoffed. You're gambling with the company's future, Ethan. I will not allow it. Ms. Sterling, my vice president, a man completely loyal to me, interjected, Ethan's instincts haven't been wrong in 5 years. I trust his judgment. That's because he's been lucky. Claire retorted. The market isn't a casino. I have a responsibility to our shareholders. We were at a complete impasse. In the end, I used my executive authority as CEO to override her and push the bid through. Claire stormed out of the room. I knew she wouldn't let it go. Sure enough, on the day of the auction, at the most critical moment, the funds I had allocated for the bid were suddenly frozen. The bank cited a last-minute administrative hold. It was Claire. She had used her mother's long-standing relationship with the bank's president. She thought she had checkmated me. But in the final second before the auctioneer's gavel fell, I transferred the winning amount from a separate account and secured the land. The money came from a private investment portfolio I had built in my own name over the last 5 years, completely separate from Sterling Industries. When I returned to the office with the signed contract, Claire's face was a mask of disbelief. "How did you get that much money?" she demanded. "I told you I haven't been idle for the past 5 years," I said, dropping the contract on her desk. "Your clever little tricks are amateur hour to me." She had lost, utterly, but she didn't give up. She threw herself into her work with a renewed ferocity, studying company assets and market analytics day and night. She was determined to prove, through sheer competence, that she understood Sterling Industries better than I did, that she was more qualified to lead. Our offices were directly across the hall from each other. Most nights, ours are the only 2 lights on in the entire skyscraper. Sometimes, through the glass wall of my office, I would see her, looking exhausted, rubbing her temples or frowning in concentration over a difficult problem. In those moments, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. It was like seeing the Claire from 5 years ago, just as proud, just as driven, willing to work for days on end to crack a single project. I had my assistant send a glass of hot milk to her office. She received it, but she didn't drink it. She just stared at the glass for a long time, lost in thought. I knew that our relationship was shifting, changing with every battle. Her animosity toward me no longer seemed so simple. And my feelings for her, they were more than just a desire for control or victory. There was an ache in my chest, a feeling I could only describe as tenderness. This war between us had become a long, grueling marathon. We both desperately wanted to win, but it seemed neither of us wanted to see the other truly destroyed. That delicate, dangerous stalemate was shattered by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. His name was Victor Thorne, the CEO of our largest competitor, Thorne Consolidated. He was the predator I had been waiting for, the one I had spent 5 years setting a trap for. Victor Thorne was a man in his 40s with the predatory smile of a seasoned fox. He walked directly into my office, followed by a smug-looking Bryce Sterling. "Mr. Hayes, an honor to finally meet you," Thorne said, making himself at home on my sofa. "Mr. Thorne, to what do I owe the pleasure?" I motioned for my assistant to bring coffee. "Let's not waste time," Thorne said, getting straight to the point. "I'm here to discuss a partnership." He slid a document across the coffee table. I picked it up. It was a stock transfer agreement. Thorne was offering to buy Bryce's 10% stake in Sterling Industries for a price 50% higher than its current market value. I glanced at Bryce. He avoided my gaze, the picture of guilt. The fool had been bought. "As you can see, I'm very serious," Thorne said with a grin. "And Bryce here has assured me that once I'm a shareholder, I'll have his full support on the board. Add that to Mrs. Sterling's shares, and I'll have a significant voice in this company." "And more importantly," he said, casting a meaningful look toward Claire's office across the hall, "I hear Ms. Sterling has recovered, and that you two aren't exactly seeing eye to eye. Instead of destroying the company from the inside, why not let a neutral third party take the reins? I can guarantee your dividend checks will be very generous." It was a blatant power play, an attempt to use our conflict to execute a hostile takeover without a fight. Before I could respond, my office door opened. Claire strode in, her expression like a winter storm. "That's a very clever plan, Mr. Thorne," she said, coming to stand beside me, a united front. "But my family's business is not your concern." Bryce panicked. "Claire, Victor is trying to help. If you keep fighting with Ethan, you'll ruin everything. It's better to—" "Shut up, Bryce." Claire's voice was like a whip crack. "You are an embarrassment to this family." Stunned into silence, Bryce shrank back. Thorne's smile never wavered, as if her reaction was exactly what he'd expected. "No need to get upset, Ms. Sterling. Business is business. But I feel I should give you two a friendly warning. That Eastbridge property you fought so hard for, I'm afraid you're about to take a massive loss on it." My stomach tightened. I stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Thorne said, standing and brushing imaginary dust from his suit, that the city's plans have changed. The new subway line is being rerouted. The land you paid a fortune for is now worthless. Ha ha ha. He strode out of my office, laughing, with a terrified Bryce trailing in his wake. The room was deathly quiet. Claire swayed slightly, the blood draining from her face. The Eastbridge project was my biggest gamble. I had leveraged almost all of the company's liquid assets to secure it. If the project failed, Sterling Industries' credit line would collapse. It would be catastrophic. That's impossible. Your intelligence, she whispered, looking at me. My own expression was grim. My source had never been wrong. Unless someone with immense power had intervened to change the outcome. Someone who could influence city planning, who had advanced knowledge of the change, and who had a motive to destroy Sterling Industries. Victor Thorne. He set me up, I said, the words tasting like ash. He had leaked false intelligence to lure me into a trap, forcing me to tie up all our capital in a single project. Then, he pulled the rug out from under us, using Bryce to launch his attack when we were most vulnerable. It was a brilliant, brutal strategy. What do we do now? Claire's voice trembled. It was the first time I had ever seen genuine fear in her eyes. She had always believed I could control any situation. But this time, it seemed we had truly been backed into a corner. I didn't answer her. I immediately started making calls. The news I received was worse than I could have imagined. The city's official website had just posted a draft proposal for the zoning change. Our banks, seeing the risk of our largest project failing, were calling in our loans. Our suppliers, hearing the rumors, were demanding immediate payment for outstanding invoices. The storm had arrived. Sterling Industries was on the verge of collapse. Neither of us went home that night. We sat in my office in silence as the hours ticked by. Just before dawn, Claire finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "Ethan, I'm sorry." I looked at her, surprised. "I shouldn't have fought you on everything. I shouldn't have tried to sabotage you," she said, her eyes red-rimmed. "If we hadn't been so busy fighting each other, maybe Thorne wouldn't have found an opening." I was silent for a moment. "It's too late for that now." "No, it's not," she said, standing and walking over to me. Her gaze was resolute. "I still want to win this company back from you. But before that, Sterling Industries is ours, and I am not going to let it fall." "What can you do?" I asked. "Something," she said, taking a deep breath, as if steeling herself. 5 years ago, after my father's accident, he left me something. He told me it was the family's last resort, the ace up our sleeve. He said I was never to use it unless there was no other choice. My heart hammered in my chest. The old man had left a final card to play. What was it? I thought I knew everything there was to know about the Sterling family. It appeared I was wrong. "What is it?" I demanded. Claire looked at me, her expression complicated. She hesitated, then finally spoke. "A key to an anonymous account at a Swiss bank. And a recording. One that's enough to send Victor Thorne to hell and back." Claire's ace was more potent than I could have imagined. From a hidden safe in the old family mansion, she retrieved a sealed envelope. Inside was a physical cryptographic key for a Swiss bank account and a small digital audio recorder. "The money in this account is more than enough to get us through the credit crisis," Claire said, handing me the key. As for this recorder, her expression turned to one of profound grief. "It's a secret conversation my father recorded with Victor Thorne just days before the crash." I pressed play. First, I heard Mr. Sterling's firm, steady voice. "Victor, are you really going to do this? Laundering money through cryptocurrency, manipulating offshore accounts. It's all illegal. If you get caught, you'll be ruined." Then came Thorne's cold, smug laugh. "Come on, Richard, times have changed. How much can you really make sticking to legitimate business? I know the risks. That's why I want you in on it. With Sterling Industries as a front, our operation can be bigger and safer than ever. I will never be a part of this." "Mr. Sterling's voice was filled with righteous anger. "And I'm going to report everything you're doing to the authorities." "Report me." Thorne's voice turned venomous. "Richard, don't be a fool. If you get in my way, don't think for a second I won't crush you. I can make you disappear from this world without a trace." The recording ended. A few days later, Mr. Sterling was dead in an accidental car crash. The truth was laid bare. I gripped the recorder, my palms slick with sweat. For 5 years, I had been quietly investigating the accident, suspecting a rival but never finding a shred of proof. I never imagined the evidence was in Claire's hands the entire time. Why? Why didn't you bring this forward sooner? I asked, my voice dry. Tears welled in Claire's eyes, but she fought to keep them from falling. I was scared. When my dad gave this to me, he warned me. He said Thorne was ruthless, that his connections ran deep. If I had revealed this back then, he would have had me killed, just like he killed my father. Playing dumb was the only way I could survive. Her voice was choked with a fear and helplessness I had never heard from her before. She wasn't a queen anymore. She was a terrified young woman. I finally understood the tightrope she had been walking for 5 excruciating years. It wasn't a performance. It was a desperate act of survival. And I, with my power plays and my need for control, had been tormenting her, fighting her, pushing her. A wave of guilt and a fierce, protective ache washed over me. I reached out and pulled her into a tight embrace. Her body was rigid at first, then she sagged against me, the dam of her emotions finally breaking. She buried her face in my shoulder and wept, releasing 5 years of pent-up terror and grief. It's okay now," I murmured, stroking her back. "Leave the rest to me." In that moment, all the conflict, the strategy, the walls between us crumbled into dust. We were no longer rivals. We were partners. We were family. And we had a common enemy. "No," she said, pulling back. Her face was tear-streaked, but her eyes were blazing with a new, unshakable resolve. "Not you. Us. We're going to make him pay for what he did to my father. And we're going to take back everything that is ours." I looked at her and nodded, my own resolve hardening like steel. The real counterattack was about to begin. In the days that followed, Claire and I worked in perfect sync. She used the funds from the offshore account to stabilize the company's finances, appeasing the banks and suppliers. I began laying the groundwork for our final move, the one that would deliver the killing blow to Victor Thorne. I knew the recording alone wasn't enough. It would cause a scandal, but a man as powerful as Thorne could find a scapegoat or use his influence to bury it. I needed irrefutable proof. I needed to catch him red-handed. I used my hacking skills, a talent I had quietly honed over the past 5 years, to breach Thorne Consolidated's internal servers. I spent days and nights sifting through mountains of data, searching for the digital trail of Thorne's money laundering operations. Claire stayed by my side the entire time, helping me analyze data and organize files. We barely ate or slept, practically living at the office. During this time, Carol and Bryce showed up. Having heard that Thorne was about to take over, they came to gloat and demand we cede control. Claire shut them down by playing them the recording. When Carol heard Thorne admit to threatening her husband's life, she collapsed, her face ashen. Bryce was terrified. He couldn't believe he had allied himself with his own father's killer. "Get out," Claire said, pointing to the door, her eyes filled with a cold fury. "As of today, we are done. I have no mother, and I have no brother." Security escorted them from the building. I knew it broke her heart, but it was a cut that had to be made. It was the price of her own survival and strength. After 3 days of relentless work, I found it. The smoking gun, a series of encrypted emails between Thorne and an offshore fund manager. They detailed every transaction, every illegal transfer, complete with dates, amounts, and account numbers. The evidence was complete. "Claire," I said, placing the compiled file in front of her, "it's time to close the net." She looked at the documents, a vengeful fire in her eyes. "No," she said suddenly, "it's not enough." I looked at her, confused. A sly, dangerous smile touched her lips. "I want him to confess." In his own words, I understood immediately. She was going to set a trap and let Thorne walk right into it. 3 days later, Sterling Industries held a press conference. The official reason was to issue a public apology for the failure of the East Bridge development project. As the company's new major shareholder, Victor Thorne was naturally invited. He arrived beaming, ready to watch us humiliate ourselves before he announced his official takeover. At the podium, I began by delivering a somber, heartfelt confession of my failure and poor judgment regarding the East Bridge deal. Then, I announced my resignation as CEO. The room erupted in a frenzy of camera flashes and reporters' questions. Thorne could barely contain his triumphant smirk. Next, Claire took the stage. She announced that, due to the company's dire situation, She was accepting Thorne's previous offer and would be selling him a majority stake in the company, allowing Thorne Consolidated to lead the restructuring. It was a bombshell. The news electrified the room. Thorne let his guard down completely. In his mind, we had surrendered. The game was over. He swaggered to the podium, took the microphone from Claire, and began his victory speech. Thank you, Ms. Sterling, for your trust. I assure all of you, under my leadership, Sterling Industries will not only recover, it will soar to new heights. As he spoke, the massive screen behind him suddenly flickered to life. The audio from her father's recording filled the room, Thorne's own voice echoing from the speakers. If you get in my way, don't think for a second I won't crush you. I can make you disappear from this world without a trace. The color drained from Thorne's face. He lunged for the controls, but it was too late. The screen began to display the evidence I had uncovered. The emails, the wire transfers, the offshore account statements. Line by line, proof of his crimes appeared in stark black and white. The room was dead silent, save for the frantic clicking of 100 cameras. No, it's not real. It's all fake. They're framing me. Thorne screamed, a cornered animal. Framing you? Claire's voice cut through the chaos like ice. She walked up to him, her gaze like a dagger. Then I suppose the truth about my father's car crash is also part of this frame job? What crash? I don't know anything about it, he blustered. Don't you? Claire asked with a chilling smile. She held up another, smaller audio player. This is from my father's dashcam. A hidden backup the police missed. She pressed play. The sound of the crash filled the room. The driver's panicked shout. Mr. Sterling, watch out. The brakes are gone. The sickening crunch of metal, the shatter of glass. And underneath it all, a faint but clear electronic voice. Target eliminated. The voice was cold, robotic. And just yesterday, using forensic software, I had recovered a deleted audio file from one of Thorne's old phones. The file contained a single recording. Thorne's voice speaking into a voice changer. Make it look like an accident. Report when the target is eliminated. I played that file through the conference hall sound system. A forensic analyst, whom we had waiting, ran a real-time comparison. The screen flashed the result. Voice print match, 99.9%. Victor Thorne collapsed. He knew he was finished. He wasn't beaten by my technical skill or by Claire's strategy. He was beaten by his own greed and his own cruelty. As if on cue, the doors to the hall burst open and police officers swarmed in. They snapped a pair of cold, steel handcuffs onto Thorne's wrists. As they led him away, he stared at us, his eyes burning with hate. I simply gave him a cold, dismissive smile. Claire came to my side and took my arm. We stood together, a king and a queen who had won their kingdom back. The flashing lights of the press conference froze our image in time, a portrait of victory. The fall of Victor Thorne sent shockwaves through Northwood City. His entire criminal enterprise was dismantled, triggering a massive upheaval in the business community. Sterling Industries, far from collapsing, rose from the ashes stronger than ever. Our investigation had exposed the corruption behind the East Bridge deal. The city council was forced to review the zoning, and the subway line was not only restored to its original path, but a new station was added right on the edge of our property. Our worthless land became one of the most valuable plots in the city overnight. The company's stock price skyrocketed to an all-time high. Bryce, for his part in Thorne's insider trading scheme, received a suspended sentence and community service. Carol, a broken woman, sold her remaining shares and left Northwood City with her disgraced son. I bought her shares, using the profits from the Eastbridge deal. When the dust settled, the Sterling Industries Board of Directors convened once more. This time, there were no challenges, no arguments. Every person in the room looked at me and Claire with a mixture of awe and fear. I stood up and walked to the head of the table, to the chairman's seat. Then, to everyone's surprise, I pulled the chair out and turned to Claire with a gesture of invitation. "My dear," I said, my voice full of a sincerity and tenderness I no longer had to hide. "This seat belongs to you. I'm officially giving it back." For 5 years, I had guarded her throne. I had been her shield against every enemy. I had purged her kingdom of every traitor. I had even made her empire stronger and more prosperous than it had ever been. I had fulfilled my promise to her father. It was time to give her back her crown. Claire looked at me, her eyes glistening. She didn't move. The entire boardroom held its breath, watching us. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "No," she said. "This seat was never just mine to begin with. Without you, there would be no Sterling Industries today." She walked to my side and took my hand, her gaze sweeping across the room. "From this day forward, Ethan Hayes will be the official president and chairman of the board of Sterling Industries. I will be his vice chair." The room was stunned. Even I was speechless. "Claire," she cut me off. She turned to face me, stood on her toes, and pressed her lips to mine. It was a kiss that was 5 years overdue. "Ethan," she said, her eyes sparkling like starlight. 5 years ago, I promised I would marry you. 5 years ago, you endured the scorn of the entire world to marry me, to protect me and my family. I know you didn't do it for the money. For 5 years, you took the hits, planned in the shadows, and did everything you had to do. I know you did it all for me. Although," she added with a playful wink, "your methods were a little tyrannical, and you scared the hell out of me for a while." I couldn't help but smile. "The war is over," she said, her hand gripping mine tightly. "Can we start over? Not as rivals, not as allies, but as husband and wife. For real this time." I looked at the woman I had loved for so long. She had been a princess, a broken doll, a brilliant adversary, and a loyal partner. But through it all, she was the one person I wanted to spend my life protecting. I squeezed her hand, our fingers lacing together. "Yes," I said, the single word holding the weight of a lifelong vow. Sunlight streamed through the massive windows, bathing us in a warm, bright light. Outside was the empire we had built together. But I knew that the prize, far more valuable than any corporation, was the woman standing beside me, the love I had lost and found again. From now on, this wasn't just the Sterling Empire. It was ours. We never had a big, fancy wedding. One weekend, we went down to City Hall and quietly updated our marriage certificate. On the way home, Claire rested her head on my shoulder. "Hey," she murmured, "when you said you did all this for yourself, for the money and the power, was that true?" I thought for a moment. 50-50. She pinched my arm. Which 50 was real and which was fake? I smiled and pulled her closer. Wanting the money and power was the fake part. Wanted to make you fall in love with me again. That was always real. She froze for a second, then a deep blush crept up her neck. She buried her face in my chest and refused to look at me. I knew our story was just beginning, and this time it would be a much greater and longer epic than any business legend.